Show. Pro Football Talk has been around for a long time, and now they are, every Sunday, part of Football Night in America, and they do a daily show all the time. And the founder of Pro Football Talk, a former lawyer, joins us now. His name is Mike Florio. How you doing, Mike?
Doing great. How are you?
We're doing better than the Lions, I think, today. What's your take on what was revealed by the Detroit News late last night?
I just can't imagine in this day and age something like that would go unknown throughout the rise of Matt Patricia as an NFL coach. At some point, your life is sufficiently public that any skeletons that are out there, and this really isn't a skeleton that was in the closet. This is a skeleton that was dancing around in plain view. He was indicted for felony aggravated sexual assault. That is a big deal, regardless of innocence. And false accusations get made all the time. A guy named Brian Banks who went away for multiple years and his victim recanted, and then he had a tryout with the Falcons and ended up working in the league office. So there are people in the NFL who have direct experience with a young man who went away for years because of a false accusation. But even without the accusation being proven or unproven, the fact that there was an indictment, that a grand jury got together and concluded that there was enough evidence to believe that this happened, that makes it a matter of significance. And I'm just amazed that it took 22 years for anyone to find it, for anyone to say anything about it. I have no idea why it came out now, and I am intrigued by what would have happened or what could have happened if it had come out during that period of time between the firing of Jim Caldwell and the hiring of Matt Patricia. Would it have been enough to get the Lions to go in a different direction? They seem to be determined to hire Matt Patricia from the moment Bob Quinn arrived as GM. Would this have been enough to get someone in the organization to say, we just can't do this in the current climate? Okay, fine, we accept that he's innocent, but with the Harvey Weinstein situation and the Me Too movement that came up in the wake of it, I could see an organization from a matter of PR, right, wrong, or otherwise, deciding we just can't do this. And regardless, if it would have come up then, my reaction would have been, why did it take this long for it to come up? I'm just astounded that something like this that was a matter of public record was under wraps for so long.
We're talking to Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk, Troy Laser Hotline here on 97.1 The Ticket. Obviously, a lot of this, Mike, is speculation at this point, and so I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. Is it your belief that the Lions did not know about this or did know about this and just assumed it would never come out, which seems like a pretty shallow assumption in this day and age, like you were just referring to?
Based upon the comments I saw from Rod Wood, the team president, to the Detroit News last night in the original article, and then reading the statement from the Lions, what it says and what it implies, I don't think they knew about it. And I don't think that there would have been a way for them to know about it by asking Matt Patricia questions. When I practiced law, there was an issue with how far you go when asking someone directly about their background. Do you ask about arrests? Do you ask about convictions? Well, what's an indictment? It's a little bit more than an arrest, but it's not a conviction. And I actually have some guidance from someone with another team. I haven't had a chance to unpack it yet, but the questions that the NFL tells them they can and can't ask. So it's one thing to pose these questions to Patricia. Then I see on Deadspin that it took them 30 seconds to find this. But the thing is, you have to know to look for it. Do you engage? If I'm the Lions, I look at this and I say, all right, I'm hiring a guy who has been the defensive coordinator of the New England Patriots for years. If there was anything out there to know, surely at some point it would have come up. He's been mentioned as a head coaching candidate. He's interviewed for head coaching jobs. At some point, you just assume everything's fine. I don't see this as some gross act of negligence by the Lions. I think this is just kind of the way things work. If there's something big that's out there, we're going to know about it. And we don't have to do a criminal background check. We don't have to do a high-level search or do this or that. We'll know about it. And this is just one of those situations where there was something out there that we should have known about that nobody knew about.
Is it possible, because in that same Deadspin article, or there was an ESPN article, I should say, ESPN.com, who talked about there was a security company that is based in New Jersey that was used, but the Lions never asked them about the report that they found. Could that have been hired? They could have been hired by the Giants?
Well, look, I haven't seen that specific angle, but anybody who knew anything about what was out there, it just because I've done a little digging, like other teams that may have been looking for coaches. Did you know about it? Did you not know about it? Did the Patriots know about it? Yeah, it had to have been a factor if someone knew about it. And I don't think the Lions knew about it. And it just makes you wonder, something that was public record, were there people with other NFL teams that were aware of it, that just filed it away for their own purposes and didn't bother to tell anyone about it? And if I'm the league office, I sure wish that if any of the 32 teams knew about it, they would have said something, because I think the league office has a very real interest in preventing these kinds of situations from erupting, because that's what nearly took down the commissioner with Ray Rice a few years ago, the perception they didn't handle that the right way. And I just think that even though I understand why the Lions didn't know, it's still a bad look when there are devices out there for finding out about something like this and you don't know. When it turned, I mean, they made an assumption that there was nothing to know, right? You can't walk around with this notion that everyone you're considering for high-level employment may have been indicted for a felony 21 years ago. Yeah, it doesn't happen every day that someone gets indicted for a felony. This is just one of those rare situations, and when it does happen, it looks bad, even though I understand why they didn't know.
We're talking to Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, NBC Sports, of course. I guess I'm, in a way, kind of actually asking to predict how this story is going to unfold. We all know that the spotlight shines a little bit brighter on Dallas and New York and the NFL, not so much so on Detroit. If this were happening in those markets, I have a feeling this would be a much bigger deal. Do you think this will be a big deal in football circles, or as long as Patricia and the Lions kind of make their explanation clear today, it will go away?
Yeah, I think the fact that they came out so strong last night with their statements was an effort to deal with it, to put out this fire before it becomes something bigger than that. And I think a lot of it depends upon whether or not the alleged victim decides at this point to say something or do something. If she decides to tell a story that is a very compelling and persuasive story, that's going to be a huge problem. Now, if it's a false accusation, what's the story to tell, and will it be a persuasive story? But if it's not a false accusation, and she's been seeing Matt Patricia on TV, every Sunday for the last however many years, and it brings back memories of what she experienced. I mean, that's if it's not false. And for now, all we know is there was enough evidence to indict. She didn't testify at trial, citing the stress of the experience. So the case was dismissed, and Matt Patricia maintains his innocence, and he's entitled to the presumption of innocence and everything that goes along with it. But if this person decides to come forward and tells a story that results in this case being litigated 22 years too late in the court of public opinion, that's when, who knows what happens. That's the thing about the court of public opinion. The rules of civil procedure, the rules of evidence, nothing applies. There are no rules. It's all driven by the mob. And if the mob looks at this and says, boy, she's telling a pretty good story, what are the Lions doing? What is the NFL doing? That's the wild card in all of this, and that's the reaction I'm getting from people around the league. What happens if the alleged victim does speak? What if she goes on 60 Minutes? What if she goes on ESPN's E60? What if she tells a story that causes people to say, oh, wow, maybe this isn't a false accusation? I think that's the one way this thing could develop that causes the dominoes to fall in a way that would not be good for the Lions or for Patricia.
Matt Patricia is scheduled to meet the media this morning at 11:45 to talk about the rookie minicamp, which starts tomorrow. Would you advise him to, because there are going to be, a lot of people from the news side of, newspapers and television stations and stuff. Would you advise him to address this head on, or just say only football questions?
No, I would say address it head on. Look, there's no legal jeopardy that he would face here, because the statute of limitations, I assume, has passed on the possibility. I mean, it's 22 years. I'd have to do research into Texas law, but I'm assuming that he doesn't face any legal jeopardy at this point. There's no way that there's an opportunity for a lawsuit to be filed against him. So as a lawyer, if there's still a chance you would find a client get himself into trouble, then you'd say don't say anything at all. This is more of a PR thing. And I think that, and I think the loose analysis a lot of people have in a situation like this is if somebody truly is innocent and they have nothing to hide, they shout it from the rooftops.
Yeah.
And I think last night the statement from Matt Patricia was an effort to shout from the rooftops, and I think he needs to give a very passionate and persuasive statement today that this was a false accusation. He didn't get a chance to defend himself. I wouldn't advise him to play this card of this was done for the sole purpose of smearing my character and reputation, because I still think it's newsworthy. I think the fact that it happened 22 years ago and never came up at any point in the last 2 decades is newsworthy, independently of whether or not someone is suggesting he did it. So, I still think that it would make sense to take it head on, give a passionate defense of himself, say what he never got to say on the witness stand at trial, and I think that's the way to deal with it. As long as if he didn't do it, that's the way to deal with it. Because if you did it and you attack it that way, you're potentially risking daring the alleged victim to come out and correct the record. So that's all the more reason that I'm convinced when someone does shout it from the rooftops. If you're innocent, tell me you're innocent, and don't hold anything back. And then I think people will say, okay, this is just some kind of a weird blip on the radar screen. We can move on with our lives, and Matt Patricia can move forward as head coach of the team.
Mike, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it. Great stuff.
All right, thanks. See you guys.
Thanks, Mike.